Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Financial Argument Channel. Today's episode is The Most Dangerous Cities When the Economy Crashes. Is your city at risk? Be prepared. We are far from the days when everything was relatively peaceful. I know that some of you are real preppers and some of you are not prepared at all. Stocking food, starting gardening, and investing in precious metals like gold and silver are often the best things to do. However, the dangers of the city where you live can reduce the effect of all your preparations, and you could still be at risk. We already know that many Americans are beginning to move away from the cities they live in. In this video, I'm going to talk about the most dangerous cities when the economy crashes. Maybe one of the places you live is one of these cities. Let's begin. What do I mean by dangerous cities? The criminal activities we saw in the protests, looting, and violence were only a small part of what's in store. Rising crime rates, increased danger of looting, social disorder, and so on. There are a lot of different reasons for this, but the main one is economic. In my previous videos, I've talked a lot about the real economy in contrast to the financial economy, because they need to be considered separately. First, just to make sure we're all on the same page, the real economy is focused on the things we all need and the activities we all take part in, like buying food or gas, getting paid for the work we do, and so on. It's the market that's governed by supply and demand, the one that really has an impact on our day-to-day lives. In a time of economic crisis or collapse, the real economy continues to exist. After all, we still need to eat, and nobody wants to work for free. The real economy existed long before we even had money we could carry around and was based on barter. So no matter how the looming economic collapse or upcoming economic slump plays out, the real economy will continue to exist in some form. But this coming collapse is still going to have an impact. What I'm going to talk about today are some of the factors that increase a city or community's vulnerability to this collapse. There are different ways to measure economic vulnerability. In making decisions about which countries might be more vulnerable to financial shocks, the UN developed what's called the Economic Vulnerability Index. This index score is determined by 8 factors related to demographics, economic activities, and issues related to geography or climate. For our purposes, only some of these factors are useful. Obviously, places on either end of the population scale are at risk, but for different reasons. A city with a really dense population, like New York, is likely to have much higher unemployment. A place with not enough people, on the other hand, might have difficulty getting people willing to do business with them if they're located in extremely rural areas. We also know that no job is truly safe. Even a farmer can have bad years for reasons beyond his control. With this in mind, let's look at some other risk factors. Research into disaster management has identified a number of factors that can be useful in talking about economic collapse. While it's not a disaster in the same way as an earthquake or a hurricane, some of the same socioeconomic factors can make a big difference. These factors include economic inequality, the availability of jobs to support the middle class, and industrial sector concentration. In previous videos, I've talked a lot about the high levels of income inequality in the USA. A 2016 study from the Brookings Institute found increasing inequality in metropolitan areas where the top earners are bringing in a lot more than the middle or lower class households, creating a rich-poor income ratio by comparing the bottom 20% of the income distribution with the 95th percentile. A city like Baton Rouge, where the bottom 20% earn a median income of about $11,800 per year, and the 95th percentile earns about $202,385 a year, has a rich-poor income ratio of 14.2%. In New York City, where residents at the bottom of the income spectrum take home median earnings of $19,144, compared with $282,125 for the top, The ratio is 14.7%. San Francisco has a ratio of 15.9 according to the report. The only reason the level of inequality isn't higher is because poorer residents tend to earn more than those in other cities. Nearing the top of the list are Miami with a ratio of 16.3, New Orleans with a ratio of 16.4, and Washington, D.C. with a ratio of 17.5. At the top is Atlanta with a ratio of 18.1. This study also found that cities where booming technology companies were located tended to have higher income inequality levels overall, which has important implications I'll discuss in a moment. Researcher Richard Florida and economist Todd Gabe were also interested in income inequality and used data over the last 5 years to create a list of the 10 best and worst U.S. cities. We see a lot of the same cities on their list, but a few new ones as well. What do tech industry jobs have to do with income inequality and economic collapse? Some industries and jobs are more vulnerable than others. I've previously talked about the demise of the petrodollar and how badly companies in the oil industry and related sectors are doing right now. Other factors that could make an industry more vulnerable to economic collapse are global supply chains. After all, it's hard to import goods with a low-value currency or when financial markets aren't functioning. But there are other factors as well. While everyone has to eat, economic shocks make people less likely to spend money on eating at restaurants, for example. In the U.S., service sector jobs make up a growing part of the nation's GDP, but most of these jobs aren't good jobs. A joint research project by professors at Cornell University Law School, the Coalition for a Prosperous America, the University of Missouri-Kansas City, and the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity has created the U.S. Private Sector Job Quality Index, JQI, measuring and comparing higher and lower earning jobs. We already know that in the U.S., higher earning manufacturing jobs were replaced decades ago. But this indicator also shows how many good jobs are available compared to lower wage, usually service sector jobs. According to Steve Denning of Forbes magazine, right now the JQI is just shy of 81, which implies that there are 81 high-quality jobs for every 100 low-quality ones. Worse, the long-term trend in the balance of jobs is even more ominous. This means that on top of economic catastrophe, many people won't be able to access well-paying work. The 2019 JQI white paper also indicates that leisure and hospitality is the largest employment sector in the U.S. right now, with 14.7 million non-management employees. The average weekly income is just $428. Most employees in this sector do not have access to benefits, particularly employer-sponsored health insurance. Of course, we've all had the importance of health insurance on our minds a lot recently. Think about this though. In a context of economic collapse, who's going to want to spend money on hotels and tourism? Not only that, but what will the loss of that income do to communities that rely on income from this sector? The same issues come into play with many other sectors, including tech companies. Not only do they frequently rely on global supply chains, but they need a population that has a large disposable income to purchase their products. Looking at tech cities, you can really see them concentrated in places like the San Francisco metro area, San Jose area, and so on. 3 of the biggest areas of tech industry concentration are also among the top 10 for economic inequality: San Francisco, Dallas, Chicago. This should raise a red flag if you're thinking of moving there. When talking about financial collapse, you probably don't really want to live in a city that depends on the financial sector. According to Z-Yen rankings, which include a number of factors, here are the leading financial centers worldwide in 2020. Notably, New York and San Francisco were both in the top 10 cities for income inequality. San Francisco and Los Angeles were both on the list of high-tech cities. See a connection? One of the factors that help a city survive economic catastrophe is diversification. it's important to have jobs from a number of different sectors instead of having jobs concentrated in a particular economic sector. This becomes especially important in the context of economic collapse, as certain concentrations could really amplify the effect. Evolution Finance's financial advice website, WalletHub, recently posted a graph of industry diversity by state. Looking only at large cities, the 10 least economically diverse are, in order from least diverse to more diverse. Some of these cities also appeared on the economic inequality lists: Atlanta, Philadelphia, Boston, and Washington, D.C. While these cities might otherwise be great places to live, that's two strikes against them in the context of economic collapse. While there are other issues you probably consider when you're looking at moving, make sure to keep these factors in mind. Severe economic shocks can create a lot of unrest in the country, as well as increasing crime rates and causing difficulties in access to food or health care. Make sure you consider all the factors before your next move. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Financial Argument Channel.